think...
he's Sharma ji ka ladka.
Exactly.
Did you know this is how your podcast was going to start off? No.
Absolutely not. Thank you. But this is an amazing story.
The city is more impatient now. The city is more vibrant. The city is... It's still buzzing. I mean, there was a different kind of buzz. But I feel that rush to get somewhere is even more palpable now than it ever was before.
I think as an immigrant, one thing that kind of always stays at the back of your mind is, being with your family.
That guy that I just talked about, who was so engrossed in pursuing the American dream and sort of chasing, what Wall Street offered, it kind of shook me up from that reverie and made me feel that there was more to life than just, driving fast cars or chasing bonuses.
People would ask, what do you do? And I would say, I make chocolate.
And, I've also had a string of failures that I'm very proud of in my...
So why chocolates, guys?
Why
not?
Like, I mean, we all love them. How did your parents react to you guys leaving your careers and starting making chocolate?
Yeah, the initial reaction, I think, like probably any immigrant parent was, but why?
Right. You're now selling the product in 2,000 plus stores, right?
On a wing and a prayer.
Yeah,
I guess a startup is a collection of micro failures. One store to 6 regions took us about 4 years.
4 years, wow. Effort and effortlessness.
Yes. That has been my biggest gift that I stumbled upon 20 years ago, is that gift of meditation.
It has been the meditation practice that amplified this inner voice and also gave me the courage.
It's very hard to pick a favorite book. It's like asking a mother to pick their favorite child.
It's very exciting to think, you know what, I'm going to quit all of this and do something that I've always dreamt about. But the actual part of doing it is
the hardest.
It's the hardest.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Rising Immigrant Show. My name is Jasmine and today we have 2 former Wall Street traders who bravely left their successful careers on the Wall Street and jumped into the world of startups. Alak and Kushal. Alak, she formerly worked as an algorithmic trader and also helped a chef at a patisserie over the weekends. Kushal, on the other hand, he worked as a quant trader and a portfolio manager. They've both held leadership roles at top prestigious financial firms in New York City, including Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, and Ethelion. And now, together, as husband and wife, they manage a chocolate company, an artisanal chocolate company based in New York City. And the company upholds the values of Ayurveda, giving back to the community, ethical trading, and also sustainability. Kushal has shared his experience post 9/11 in a book called On a Wing and a Prayer. And they both teach meditation and breathwork. So allow me to welcome Kushal and Alak. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
for having
so
us.
much for having us.
Thank you so much for coming today. I know it was hard for me to get you guys here, but now that I have you here, I'm going to have you for the next 1 hour and we're going to dive deep into your lives and try to share some advice for people who are trying to, start their journey in the food space and, also offer them some motivation so that they can keep going.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So let's start with your childhood. Where did you guys grow up and when and how did you come to the US?
Go ahead.
So I was born in the UK. So I was born in Birmingham.
Okay.
And then because my parents are both doctors and they were residents there. And then when I was around 4 years old is when we moved back to India. Okay. So my most memories are of growing up in India.
Reverse immigration. UK to India.
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, as a child, I think most of my memories are of growing up in India in a very small, loving family, very secure, protected. I have a younger sister. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of where we grew up. Nice. I grew up in Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad, Gujarat.
Nice. Yeah. And what about you, Kushal?
I actually grew up probably 10 minutes away from where she grew up.
Really? Did you guys know each other?
Not really.
Okay. Wow.
Not really for a long time.
Wow.
For most of the time that we spent in Ahmedabad. But yeah, I grew up in India and came here for my grad studies and stuck around.
Wow. And when did you come here?
I came here in 98 again for my grad studies. So I went.
Did you guys know each other then?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
So where did you meet and how did you guys meet?
So of course, Ahmedabad is a small town, and so you hear kind of murmurs about different people. So I'd heard about Kushal because he was one of those unconventional people at the time, who had really secured very high grades where he could pretty much get admission into anything.
So he's Sharma ji ka ladka.
Exactly. but he was actually going to opt for, structural engineering because he wanted to pursue something in that career. And so he was kind of, talked about is like, why would somebody with such good grades get into structural engineering? So that's how I'd heard of him. And I think the very first time I would say I saw him was kind of like a filmy scene where we were I was going down the stairs of the admission office and he was coming up. And we'd never met each other, but somewhere it clicked to me that, this is the guy that people are talking about somehow. And I turned around and I think he turned around at the very same time.
This is so DDLJ.
Did you know this is how your podcast was going to start off? No.
Absolutely not. Thank you. But this is an amazing story. Okay.
But long story short, we met in a dusty admin building of our college in undergrad.
Okay, that's amazing. And when you guys moved here, were you guys in touch at that time?
Yes, so I moved here right after graduating my undergrad. He was in India for another year. So yeah, we stayed in touch. Just at the time, there wasn't many ways you could actually connect, but email was the best way we stayed connected.
Got it. And Kushal, tell me about your first job here. When and how did you graduate? What did you study? And then who did you start working with?
I studied information systems and computer science at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And, against the grain, I chose to work in finance at that time. This was year 2000 at the peak of .com. And my entire class, actually, I still remember vividly, without exception, my entire class went working for Silicon Valley to the West Coast. And somehow I felt that, it didn't feel right to me. Somehow I felt I didn't belong there. And so I was the only guy who came working
to New York.
On Wall Street in New York. I like numbers, and when Goldman came to interview on the campus, I'm like, this is where I belong. So I started working as an analyst at the bottom of the ladder with Goldman Sachs. And that happened to be my first job. A formative job that paved my way for so many things that I learned in the future.
Nice. And which year was this?
This was year 2000.
2000. So you came here really early.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've seen New York City change over the years.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So how do you think it's different now versus in the 2000s, early 2000s?
I think the vibe has changed. The city is more impatient now. The city is more vibrant. The city is... It's still buzzing. I mean, there was a different kind of buzz. But I feel that rush to get somewhere is even more palpable now than it ever was before. There was some feeling of being settled. And again, it's all relative. But back then, there was still some feeling of, okay, this is what I'm doing. And I see myself going here, going deeper into this area. Whereas now when I meet people, there's so many more options. There's so many more distractions. And their antennas are open in 5 different directions all at once.
We're also exposed to so many different things outside,
yes.
right? Earlier we were limited. We only knew what Sharma ji's ladka was doing pretty much. But now we know what everything around the world is doing. So that creates a lot of pressure in the first place.
And also remember when, it makes us look probably old, but back in those days, there were no cell phones. So if you can imagine the life without a smartphone, you can also imagine how the opportunities would have multiplied after that in the post-smartphone world.
Got it. And Alak, tell me a little bit about your education and your first job.
So I graduated in computer science, master's in computer science from University of Southern California. And my first job was with Cisco Systems. Again, I think it was the tech bubble. People were flying me in for, different interviewing opportunities. People were fighting over sending these at that time, like gift baskets to kind
really?
of
That would have felt
yeah,
nice.
like woo you into saying
Uh-huh.
accept my offer over the other. But I think there was something about Cisco Systems in terms of the role that they offered, and also having accomplished and as a working for an established company is what I was looking for at the moment. So
And the
Got it.
biggest basket? Oh, just kidding.
Of course, yeah, that too.
yes.
So I know, Kushal, you climbed up the ladder very quickly, if you were to say it like that. In your book, you write about, what that progression was for you. Tell me a little bit about your time at the Wall Street. What was it like?
Sometimes when you don't really know what you're doing or what you're up against, the life becomes easier.
Mhm.
You don't think, oh, how am I going to get there? Because you don't know where are you
Where-
going to get to.
Mhm.
So I think for me, it was just a game. It was so much fun. I loved what I was doing. And my passion was so aligned with sort of what I was doing day in and day out. So the hard work didn't feel that hard. And so the results came naturally. I didn't have to put effort. Of course, I've worked my tail off, but it didn't feel that hard.
Got it. Because you were enjoying
I was
the work.
totally enjoying it. I was working with some of the finest minds on this, I could find. And I was in New York. Imagine coming from Ahmedabad to New York. It was the biggest city, because
Right.
I stayed for a year in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm biased still. I think it's still the biggest city.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was like, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. Wow, where have I come? So I was just loving it.
Got it. And at some point, you guys also decided to move back to India. What was going on in your heads?
I think as an immigrant, one thing that kind of always stays at the back of your mind is, being with your family,
Right.
being with your parents. It's so hard. I think it's changed over a period of time with technology, but still, those goodbyes at the airport never ever seem to get easier, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there was something that we consciously were thinking about, that we really don't want to ever experience a moment where, our parents are struggling or they're going through a challenging time in their life and we're not able to be there for them. And also we felt like we had accomplished a lot coming to this country. Like whatever the check marks we had to make, a lot of them were made. We saw how it could be done, and there was some kind of satisfaction there, and we thought, okay, now it's a good time to go back to India, closer to family, and kind of build our career there.
No, makes sense. And Kushal, you've shared your vivid memories from 9/11 in your book, and it changed the course of your life.
Sure, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what happened that day and, the weeks that followed it.
If life is a book, that 9/11 is truly a new chapter for me. It was. And there are some moments, some experiences that truly define you, and they change the course of your life. For me, that was one such seminal event, that when that happened, that guy that I just talked about, who was so engrossed in pursuing the American dream and sort of chasing, what Wall Street offered, it kind of shook me up from that reverie, and it made me feel that there was more to life than just, driving fast cars or chasing bonuses. I didn't know what that was, but there was that wake-up call that, listen, there is something more than what meets the eye here, and it's worth achieving. It's worth going after. So that was an awakening that came. For a few moments, I also thought that perhaps midlife crisis came too early.
But profound incidents like those do have that kind of an effect. I'd actually like to share a story, because when I was reading your book, it reminded me of an incident that happened with me. So I was in my college. I was just starting a new job, living in Canada, and I met with a road accident where I experienced a near-death experience. I came out fine. I wasn't hurt a lot. My back got hurt, but I was okay at the end of the day. But when it was happening, my whole life flashed in front of my eyes. And it was like that 1 second. And in that moment, I felt there was so much that I hadn't achieved. And when I said achieved, it wasn't like, material
Yeah.
success. It was like, oh, I haven't done this, or I haven't experienced that. And that time I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, And that was one of the visions I had. I felt like I wanted to have my own family. So, sometimes incidents like those, and 9/11 was a big, big, big accident. Like, those incidents do have an effect on you like that. If we talk about your professional careers, you both, as we just talked, you both had successful professional careers, right? What made you guys decide that you wanted to quit and do something else?
I think success. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's like
You
we
go,
both
Alak.
start.
Yeah.
I think for me, if it was a one word answer, it would be my inner voice. And what helped me amplify that inner voice was my meditation practice. I think we all have talk about gut feeling or intuition or knowing that I want to do something, right? But somehow in the hustle bustle of life and the events, something that is so important gets kind of pushed away so back that there is no room for you to for it to scream and for you to hear. And I felt like, and again, same thing happened with me, especially that this thing kept coming up that, yes, I'm thriving where I am, but there's something missing. I have been given different gifts. This doesn't seem to be my be all end all. Yes,
Or your calling.
Exactly. I think that's the right word. Be my calling. But you start defying that with logic. Oh, you've studied for this. You worked so hard for this. Why do you want to quit at the top? Right?
And we've been conditioned to think that way, right? That's a big part of Indian parenting, that we're conditioned to follow a set path. And I'm not really against that. Our families have seen that path. It's comfortable. You know how it's going to play out for you. So it's easier to take that path versus, trying something brand new, which nobody knows how it's going to play out.
Exactly. I think it definitely, I think the discipline and the commitment that I see in, a lot of us comes from that mindset also, right? Because you and the drive also that you have to accomplish this, versus I feel at times when you're given a very open canvas without any parameters around it, you yourself feel very lost. But again, I think sometimes, like you said, it ends up being at the other side of the spectrum, and then only specific roles and titles and companies, or your success is measured, in those parameters. And so I would keep pushing this voice away, saying, oh, it's midlife crisis. Oh, I'm just bored with what I'm doing. But I have to tell you that it has been the meditation practice that amplified this inner voice and also gave me the courage to follow it, because I think that was the hardest thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because suddenly you don't have a paycheck. Suddenly you don't know what you're doing. Suddenly you have lost that sense of identity.
Right.
See, when you and I, anybody you're having a conversation with, within the first minute, people ask you, what do you do?
Exactly. That's a big part of your identity, right? Hey, I work as an analyst, or hey, I'm a podcast host, or like the titles give us our, self-identity and also the confidence.
Yeah, and how you're perceived by other people.
Right.
And I experienced that so strongly because after I quit, people would ask, what do you do? And I would say, I make chocolate. And, the first reaction would be, oh yeah, my relative's daughter also makes chocolates at home. Or if you're making chocolates, make sure you have us try some, because it's already diminished to, or it's like, why beta, what happened? Like, did you lose your job? Are you not able to find a job? So it's very interesting to kind of see how, some of these decisions are perceived.
Got it. It's funny you said that. So I pursued a master's degree in food science. So I studied food chemistry, analytics, quality assurance, food safety. So whenever anybody would call me from back home in India, they'd be like, kya pad rahe ho? And I'm like, food science, like home science. Or the second was like being a chef, right? I'm like, we're close. And I also enjoy cooking. So everybody would think I'm learning to become a chef, and I'm like, Yes,
not
but
quite.
no. It's different. Kushal, tell us about what was going on in your head and what was your mindset at that time.
I mean, like how she has a gift of creativity, I have a gift that I get bored quickly. And so I'm always looking for new frontiers. I'm always experimenting with things. From childhood, I've had that tendency. So whether it's careers or whether it's kind of what keeps me excited, what keeps me busy, I don't think much. I jump first and ask questions later. I'm that kind of person. So,
Got it.
so this is not my first startup. This is,
Right.
and I've also had a string of failures that I'm very proud of in my startup tales.
So your first startup was a tech startup,
It was a
right?
tech startup.
Which was acquired by AirPush.
No, that's the second startup.
That's the second.
The
Okay.
First one failed.
Okay. That's good to know. So tell us about the early startup.
The early startup was, and as I like to, my previous co-founder and I, we always make fun of each other. We say we're always ahead of our times. That's what we say when people don't get what you're trying to do. But it was a social media startup back just even before these Facebook groups became a thing.
Oh.
So it was something on along those lines. We became TechCrunch finalists, but I guess it didn't go too far. Our money ran out before our patience did. But we were able to pivot that into something else, which then eventually saw the light of the day.
Got it.
That was Hubble, the startup that got acquired. But that was a tech field. But then after that, I also had a finance startup, and then eventually a food startup.
Trading firm, which was later acquired.
Yeah.
Got it. So why chocolates, guys?
Why
Why
not?
not?
Like, I mean, we all love them, but from finance to tech to chocolates, like, tell us about that.
I think, like you said, I've always had a way with food, and I love working with food, and especially desserts. And I think ever since I've married this guy, anytime you ask him what flavor of any dessert, it's always chocolate.
Yeah. Same. Chocolate.
Exactly. And I also felt like, chocolate played a very close kind of role in my life growing up. There were some very happy memories with my father traveling to the UK and bringing a suitcase full of chocolates. So I think there was a lot of kind of resonance around chocolates. And what we wanted to do as we kind of brainstormed the ideas, we wanted to make Ayurveda more mainstream. That was the mission that we wanted to kind of move forward with. But at the same time, we did not want it to be boring, stuck in supplements. We wanted to make it more approachable, more fun, and for people to realize that Ayurveda doesn't mean that it's rigid, and it actually meets you where you're at in your life. And especially if we were doing something in the West, we wanted to introduce it in a more modern fashion. So I think it all culminated together to kind of land into the world of chocolates. And
That's beautiful. I mean, we all love chocolate. There's never enough chocolate that we can have. You're now selling the product in 2,000 plus stores, right? But how did you guys first sell your products? Like, how did you make that first sale?
Yeah, I think that I think I have to give a lot of credit to Kushal. So I was very happy experimenting with different recipes in the kitchen, and he would be the official taste tester, right? That this is good, this is not good. At the cost of me getting very upset with him when he didn't like something. But finally, he was like, I think we are ready, to take the product out. So he booked us a spot at the local farmers market. And I still remember, for me, that was like the most, the scariest day probably, because it was Judgment Day. What if people don't like...
Putting yourself out there.
Yeah, it was actually, because there was no plan B. And did that mean I'd already failed?
So and I'm assuming you guys have quit your jobs at this point, or no? Are you still working?
No, I've quit my job, and Kushal's running another startup.
Oh, okay.
But so he's with AirPush at the time, and but he's very much unofficially part of Elements. So yeah, and so I'd quit my job, and we go to this market. It's chocolates. To save money, I told Kushal I don't want to get a tent, which means the sun was
Don't
nice.
tell me it rained.
It did. It did actually. Towards the end of the market, it did. So the sun was suddenly like so bright, and Kushal was running around to get a few things. The sun, the wind, all those parameters, and I was like, this was such a wrong decision. Half an hour into it, people started coming in. People started trying. Strangers started buying the chocolate, and I think immediately the state of my mind changed. From that whole thing about being negative about it, suddenly there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And since then it's just been kind of going to these different markets the first year, validating your product, getting customer feedback. But that first sale was very precious.
Your friends will always, your family, they'll always encourage you. They'll always buy your product. But when complete strangers, especially those who know their chocolate, we knew we were up to something when I vividly remember there's this family from Europe. And they knew their chocolate. I could tell because when they were trying the chocolates, they were speaking to each other and talking about how the chocolate was tempered. And, they were talking about nuances. And they pretty much bought so much chocolate to take it with them to give as gifts to their family back home. So that's when we knew that, okay, what we're doing has, it holds up in eyes of people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's instant validation as well, right? You can see people's reactions right away. When we were doing Zesty Kitchen, that was my favorite part because, when you're putting your product out in the store, it takes a while for you to get feedback, right? For the product to sell, for the, the managers to get back to you on like how it's doing and so forth.
Exactly.
But when you see people trying the product in the market, it gives you like instant feedback, and that's the most valuable, right? You can ask people, what do you think you can do better, or like, sometimes their words might say something else, but then their facial expressions are the best judge of the reality of the situation.
Exactly.
Kushal, how did you guys grow this business, and is there something that surprised you on the way?
On a wing and a prayer. I had this tendency to go back to the mistakes we've made before in our previous startup, because those are the easy ones to make. One of them could be just run after funding, create something where you're chasing the top line, build a valuation and then sell, without worrying about actually building the value, actually building a profitable business. So this time we thought we'll do it right. This is kind of, we both agree that this is our swan song. So it's not like there's something that we're thinking, let's be done with it and then we'll do something else. No. So from the very beginning, the focus was on doing the right things. So we built a very strong platform. In a food CPG startup, a general trend is to find a co-packer who will manufacture for you. We built that capacity in-house from day one. We built the capacity for logistics and fulfillment. We didn't go for a 3PL. So all these kind of small things we learned ourselves and built it in-house.
Got it.
And that laid a very strong foundation to build upon. And largely through word of mouth, largely through customer validation from one store in Whole Foods to 6 regions, it just grew because the product spoke for itself.
Got it.
So that was our biggest focus, on making sure that we focus on the customer experience, and then everything else will kind of follow.
Got it.
I think the biggest surprise on the pathway was that chocolate is actually seasonal.
Oh, really?
That people don't consume as much chocolate in the summer months.
So it's comforting, maybe, you want to have it in the colder months.
It's so many things. I think it's logistically also. You don't want your chocolate to melt.
Right.
That's one thing. And also there's better options like ice creams and colder desserts that you opt for in the summer months. So
for me, it's like definitely very comforting. When I'm low, like chocolate's my go-to. I'll have a small cube. I don't indulge in a lot, but I'll, treat myself to a small cube, and then that'll make my day.
Yeah.
If we talk about failures, did you guys have any failures early on?
I think there are so many little
Yeah.
things that you can call failure. For example, we started with Elements Truffles, which was the small, like cubes, truffles that we were making. And very quickly we realized that when you create something like truffles, people only buy it as gifts. They don't buy it for personal consumption.
Special occasion.
Mm.
And that limited your market significantly. You know, people still don't allow themselves to indulge in a box of truffles. Like truffles is something only if you're hosting a party or you're going to somebody's place. But a bar of chocolate is something I can indulge in for myself. So I think that was a very first quick learning for us to say, you know, we cannot just be sticking to truffles. We need to create a truffle chocolate bar. And so I think within the first year itself, like we quickly started our focus on the chocolate bar. So I feel, I don't know if it's called a failure or learning. Yeah. But I think those, I feel, happen at, it's a constant. Evolution in terms of whether we try to do distribution, broker, like we've learned
I guess
so
a
much.
startup is a collection of micro failures. You know, I feel that way. From the first time you sent a big order and then you get a call that all the bars have melted. That's a failure. You know, that you feel like...
And then you figure it out, right?
And you figure it
go
out.
back, iterate.
Yeah, exactly. Or you know, the first negative review on Amazon. And you feel, oh my goodness, like what have we just, led ourselves into? So these kind of things are failures, but then you learn and then you resolve to do better the next time.
No, absolutely. And I guess that's the beauty of having your own business, right? Making mistakes and learning from it. But the biggest lesson here is to keep moving, right? Because sometimes when we're at the bottom, we think there's no going up. But we have to understand it's a wave.
Yeah.
Actually, there is no other way but to go up when you're at the bottom.
Right. Kushal, you mentioned about starting from one whole food store to now multiple regions.
Yeah.
How long did it take you guys to get there? And was it like an overnight thing or there was a process? Tell us a little bit about how
you know about food. Nothing here is overnight. But yeah, it was quite a process. To get into the first store itself was a challenge, and we got lucky that we met someone at a local market who then gave us an opportunity into our first store. It was in Bridgewater in New Jersey. Clearly remember. I personally went to deliver the box of chocolates. And then from there, these big stores focus a lot on shelf velocity. Oh, yeah. They want to see how well the product is moving.
Right.
So in the local program, they give you a break, but then from there to grow to the next level, the product has to find that validation amongst their customers. So it slowly started happening. And again, there also we learned a lot, the value of doing demos in store, or offering regular promos, doing trade spend. These were things not even remotely in our consciousness. Right. I mean, we never knew these things existed until we realized, the velocities are dipping here. They're not ordering again. What's happening? And they say, but you haven't done a promo in a long term. What's a promo? Right. That's how you learn, and then you slowly improve, and that's how it started growing. But yeah, from one store to 6 regions took us about 4 years.
4 years, wow.
And I still remember, every local Whole Foods we would go to, Kushal will go and talk to the buyer. Ask him questions. How do I grow? What do I do? How is my product doing? How does my product compare to the other products? Like this whole packaging rebranding that we recently went through was actually inspired by one of the inputs from one of the buyers who said, your product's great, but it's getting lost on the shelves. So I think it's always putting yourself out there and being open to kind of taking that feedback and growing from there. Also helped us, yeah.
When I was, selling Zesty, one of the biggest surprises was, as you mentioned, demos and sampling. I didn't know how big a role they played in, for you being able to sell your product. Costco thrives on that, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, their whole strategy, everything revolves around making people try their samples. Yeah. And people go there with that intention as well. Hey, what new samples are we going to get to try? Yeah. But for them, that drives a significant portion of their sales. Quite interesting. Now, before we move any forward, I had this big question when I was researching about you guys. It's the biggest question I've had. how did your parents react to you guys leaving your careers and starting making chocolate?
I can go.
Yeah,
I
go
guess.
ahead.
So, prior to kind of leaving the corporate world, I had taken my parents-in-laws like to the Goldman office. It was a brand new office. And there was such a sense of pride, in them, like, wow, like, that
Right.
you're working here. And when I first told them that, this thought is coming up where I think I want to venture something in food, I think they were like, but why? Why do you want to get in food? It's possible, there's so many lawsuits, or our friends have tried something before and you've accomplished so much here. Why do you want to kind of go back to it? And while I tried to answer some of those things, I think when I shared with them that this is something that both Kushal and I are on board with and we want to give it a shot, I think that the two of us are willing to do that together and that we have each other's support kind of gave them that peace of mind.
Right.
And I think thereon, it has been a completely different story where our parents have helped us wrap chocolate bars, pour chocolates, like proudly share, articles of us on the WhatsApp groups with the friends. But yeah, the initial reaction, I think, like probably any immigrant parent was, but why?
Right. Like, we did so much. We got you, like,
Yes.
the education, sent you to America, and now that you start making chocolate, I can't even imagine. My parents would freak out, by the way, when I told them, like, hey, I'm leaving this job. But then, my circumstances were different. I had, like, I had just delivered my first baby, and they're like, okay, it's fine for you to take a step back. And in their head, it wasn't like, hey, she's doing something significant. It's like, okay, theek hai, chal raha hai. Matlab, it was fine.
The priority is the baby.
Right,
so then
right.
the-
So then, like,
yeah.
okay, it wasn't a big deal because they knew something else was going on, so it was fine. If it would have been otherwise, oh my God, I can't even imagine my dad's reaction. Like, padha likha ke, ye.
My father was actually the opposite. I mean, he's always been the biggest cheerleader in my life. And so, and he knows my eccentricities, and he knew that if I've decided to do something, then there was no point, opposing it, even if he felt that way. But he always said that I don't know how, but somehow things just work out eventually. So you do crazy things, but somehow things work out. So there's no point.
So you have track record.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So he was like, I mean, he always, proudly endorsed what we had started to do from the very beginning.
Nice.
So it was fun.
It's good to have family support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it was very strong. I think the initial concern definitely came in, but once their minds were settled, I think they have been so supportive, and I think that just carries you along on the tough days, honestly, when you know that everybody is with you.
Got it. If you think about the future, your personal future and Elements Truffles' future, do you guys have a vision?
I think the vision for me is really to make Ayurveda mainstream by tying the science in with day-to-day products. So we've started with chocolates. We've done drinking chocolate. We're doing protein. But we would like to expand, into more categories where people have an Ayurveda touch point way more than just, maybe once a week. But it can be
becomes
woven
a part
into-
of your life.
Exactly.
Through these products.
Yeah.
No, that's
And I think doing it while having fun.
No, absolutely.
So
That's
that's
the most
important.
important.
Yeah.
I guess, like you said, it's to let this feeling deeply settle in that what is healthy for you is not unpleasant to consume. Usually it's they don't go together.
Protein shakes, like, the green powder mixes that we have to drink in the morning nowadays.
So really want to create a brand, build a brand where people, they pick up their own, it's Elements. Yeah, it'll be clean, it'll be healthy, and it'll be yummy.
Yeah.
And if we get this trifecta, hit this every time, then I think we've
The
delivered.
secret for success. Absolutely. Kushal, in your book, actually, I had a lot of questions while I was reading it, but I wanted to pick a few and then, see what was relevant for our audience. In your book, you write about putting in the effort, but also letting go, right? effort and effortlessness.
Yes.
And there's a difference between letting go and giving up.
Yeah.
How do you strike that balance in your personal and professional life? And what do you have to say about this?
It's a deep question. But I think, it's more of a happening than doing. That very effort to strike a balance sometimes is counterproductive. And to the extent that you can't just say, oh, I have to strike the balance, I have to strike the balance. In doing that, you almost miss the boat. But what I learned from my teacher, Gurudev Sri Ravi Shankar, is that it's a very delicate balance. It's like a dance. It's like almost like, you put an effort to get on the train, but you don't walk up and down in the train once you're on board. So there is a lot of effort to get somewhere or to do something, but once the train has left the station, you just chill. You just give universe to also support you. You give universe a chance to support you.
Right.
And I think that has worked out for me. And every time it works out, it gives me more strength to take longer leaps into unknown.
So when I was little, or like even growing up, whenever something wouldn't work out in my favor, I'd go to my parents, obviously upset, and they'll say, hukam. Accept it as the universe's way of saying that it wasn't meant for you, or this is how it's supposed to be. And then I'd always ask this question, like, if this is how it's supposed to be, then why put in the effort in the first place?
Yeah.
If the universe is going to do what it's going to do, then why do the effort?
Yeah.
So I keep going back to the point, like, hey, what's the right thing to do here?
Yeah.
And I guess saying that you still need to do everything you need to do in order for your business, your personal life, whatever you're doing in your life to be successful, but also at that point be like separating yourself from success or failure.
Yeah.
I feel like, we get so attached to our efforts or, the outcome. If it's a success, then we feel like we applaud ourselves and give ourselves the credit. And if it's a failure, we beat ourselves up. But how do you separate yourself from the successes and the failures? Do you have a secret?
I think meditation helps. That gives that perspective, and it creates this experience, not an intellectual concept, an experience that this is a game. And you're playing a game. And now you're playing a game. Games are never deterministic. You do it for the fun of it. And if it were deterministic, there would be no fun in playing the games, right? If you knew the outcome from the beginning. So I guess that has been my biggest gift that I stumbled upon 20 years ago, is that gift of meditation. And that, like how Alak said, not only amplifies the inner voice, it gives you this strength to be with it, no matter how uncomfortable it is sometimes.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm still to get there, by the way. A long way for me to go.
I tell you something, Yasmin. If I could do it, anyone can. If someone with my mind can settle down, anyone can. Trust me.
And why do you say that?
It's because I have been bestowed with this monkey mind. Like it's constantly active, constantly trying to do different things, constantly jumping from one thing to the other. But in those moments of calm, if I can just settle down and connect, and it's a practice. It's not something that comes naturally. If you close your eyes, of course, your mind would be flooded with thoughts. But with the right technique, when you have the right technique, anyone can do it.
Yeah, more often than not, when I sit down, I'll tell you what happens. I go through a mental list of all the things I have to do.
Of course.
What am I going to pack for my kids' lunch tomorrow? What goes in the bag? Like, what are they going to wear? What am I, everything. But how do you shut that noise? Like, is that with...
That comes with the technique.
Like what you're experiencing, everybody experiences. Actually, the minute you close your eyes, the noise in your mind even becomes louder. And trying to tell your mind, don't think, doesn't work.
Right.
Because
it's the opposite.
Exactly. Because that is the nature of the mind, right? So, but allowing it to run through that without you resisting it, eventually will settle the mind down.
How long do you give yourself before you decide to quit? I usually quit few minutes in.
I think the technique itself is a meditation, so it won't let you quit. It'll sweep you with it. And it's just very simple, innocent breath-based technique. We take our breath for granted. But there's a beautiful connection between our emotions, our thoughts, and our breath. You know that, right? Like if you're angry, you breathe certain way.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas you're surprised, you breathe certain way. But if you turn that equation around, if you learn to modulate your breath, sort of your mind will follow.
It's beautiful. I see you guys are completing each other's sentences. How is it working together?
So I often joke with him that if we have survived to work together for 8 years now, I think
Can survive anything.
we must really love each other. But I think in all honesty, one of the biggest reasons why I feel like our partnership works in business is because of our complementary skill set. So we are two very different people, but our mission is aligned. And I think with that, what happens is we actually are able to address a lot of things with that different skill sets. So I feel it's very important to be aligned on the mission, and then you are able to get past any differences.
Got it. And if I talk about you, Kushal, you've mentioned your and your father's love for books.
Yes.
Tell us about your favorite books.
Oh, favorite books. There's so many.
I know, but like your top 3 or top 2, let's say. I know it's hard, right?
The top one that comes to my mind is Notes for the Journey Within.
Okay.
That book sits on my bedside. So every night I just open a page and, oh yeah, that's what I need today. Born to Run is one of my favorite books. I used to like growing up in India. I got into Russian literature, so I like a lot of Russian authors and their books, Nabokov, Solzhenitsyn. It's just there's so much depth in those books. But I don't read much anymore. It's like asking a mother to pick their favorite child.
That's good.
Or asking a chocolate to pick their favorite flavor of the bar.
By the way, what's your best chocolate flavor?
My favorite flavor is, of course, I love all my kids, but still, I have a special feeling for orange and chocolate. Like there's some nostalgia to that combination. So yeah, I'm an orange chocolate girl. So
for me,
orange
it's
crunch.
Like rose and cardamom. Yeah. If I was to ask you, what is the best piece of advice you both have received when you started the business or, in your early days, what would that be? And what advice can you offer entrepreneurs in the food space or anybody who's, for that matter, hoping to start something new?
The advice that I followed or the advice that I didn't follow?
Both. Which advice did you find the most meaningful? And then what would you pass on?
I guess focusing on the customer experience was something that I learned from one of my mentors. That no matter what, just singularly stay focused on that. That, how we sometimes loosely say customer always wins or customer is always right. But kind of implementing it in when you're running when you're shipping a product, it's actually quite a different experience. So living by that has been has contributed a lot to our journey.
Got it.
And that's something I could pass along.
That's amazing. And what about you, Alak?
I think the biggest piece of advice that really stuck with me was kind of twofold. One is having your foundation laid out very clearly. So why am I exactly doing this? And remembering the why. And yes, I'm passionate about making chocolates and I want to make a difference. But I think the biggest why with Elements is that we give back profits for education of children. And that has been the biggest why that has helped us sail through the tough times, when you almost feel like, what's the point of all this? But there is a point. You're making a difference even in a single child's life, the impact that it can have. I think that is very powerful. And I think the second fold to that is enjoying the journey instead of running
Right.
kind of behind the goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has been very crucial. You often get attached to the goal, but soon you realize you're moving from one goal to the other and you're getting exhausted in trying to achieve that. But when you start focusing on the journey and enjoying the journey, it just, when you reach the goal also, it's like, okay, it's a pit stop and let's continue the journey. What I would kind of pass on to people who are starting is, one of the biggest lessons I learned is about progress over perfection. I love to plan things. I love to put things into spreadsheet. I love to have everything figured out before I take the first step. But that's not how it works. You will never have everything figured out. And if you're going to wait for that, then you're never going to start. So
So you start and then you figure it out. That's the way to
Always.
go about it. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm glad we were able to do this. Thank you again for coming to my studio today and giving me your time, which is the most valuable of all. And I hope we can sit down again and talk more about, work, business, spiritual life, all of that.
Life.
yes. No. Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
us.
Didn't even realize where time went by.